Hello everyone, my name is Roya, and today I will be reviewing The Hythrun Chronicles by Jennifer Fallon, thus far, as the third book in the third trilogy is not yet released in the United States. It's only in Australia at the moment. But anyway, I get a lot of questions about this series because I discovered this series in 2017, and I read, I devoured this series, and I love it so much, and I talk about it on this channel all the time. And so I do get some questions about, like, where do I start with this series, blah, blah, blah. And so I do have a video about kind of a reader's guide to Jennifer Fallon, like what series she's written and where to kind of start with her books and whatnot. But I thought that since now that I've read all of the Hythrun Chronicles thus far, all three trilogies, save the very last book that's out so far, I decided that I should do a full review of this entire series. So similarly to Robin Hobb's Land of the Elderlings, this is a series that spans like several different series. So there are three trilogies in this series. And this takes place in a world where the gods kind of walk among people. People kind of see the gods as active in their life and all that stuff. And it takes place mainly in three kingdoms, but really there are like 4 or 5 that have things happen in them throughout this series. But mainly it takes place in Medallon, Hythria, and Fardonia. All of these kingdoms do things very differently. It's very the world building is very strong in this series because all the kingdoms are very different from each other despite being like next to each other, and they all kind of have different alliances versus, like, you know, they have conflict with each other, all kinds of stuff. So a lot of things start happening. So a lot of our characters are kind of princes and stuff like that because there's a lot of political intrigue, but there are also a lot of characters who are not royal people at all. So anyway, I'm just going to get started kind of talking about each of these trilogies and what they are about. The first trilogy of the Hythrun Chronicles is the Demon Child trilogy, which consists of Medallon, Treason Keep, and Harshini. And this series mainly follows a girl named Rashiel who finds out that she is the prophesied demon child, and that basically means that she is half Harshini, which is basically a people characteristic of elves that are like, people aren't really sure if they really exist or not anymore because they've been cut off from humans for so long. So she is the half-human daughter of who was formerly the king of the Harshini. But she grew up not knowing that. She grew up being raised by a human, etc., etc., who basically led her to believe that she was fully human and all of that. The first book, Medallon, is probably my least favorite of this entire series, basically just because it focuses mostly on Rashiel, and she is just a very bland main character. There is still a lot of interesting conflict and stuff happening with her and whatnot, but we're sort of told what her personality is more than shown it, and I think that is where this first book kind of falls flat. The second 2 books are a lot more interesting because they get to a lot of other characters who definitely are more interesting and have a lot more personality. So in the second 2 books, especially, we are introduced to Princess Adrena, who is being made to marry a prince of a different kingdom, and he is a very conservative, like, douchebag who hates her. And so she comes from a kingdom where it's normal to have just like prostitute people show you what to do and whatnot if you're like a noble person, and she's going to this place where, and she wears like belly shirts and everything all the time, like she doesn't care if she's showing like way too much skin, like she doesn't give a crap because that's just how people in her kingdom do things. And then she goes to this kingdom where people are so conservative that literally if you show like even your neck or your like arms or anything, people are like, oh! So she's made to like act very, to dress really conservatively and all kinds of stuff, and she just doesn't give a crap. She hates that situation. She hates this douchebag prince, all kinds of stuff. And then so she runs away, and she meets a different prince she meets Daemon Wolfblade, who is a prince of a different kingdom, and they fall in love, but they kind of are both very strong-willed, and they sort of hate each other, and they think that each other hate each other, but they really are actually into each other, all kinds of stuff. And so they are seriously my bookish OTP. I love them. Like, they are such a good couple, and just all the stuff that happens with them is so good. And another thing about this trilogy and why it's probably my favorite, despite the first book being kind of meh for me, I do think that this trilogy as a whole is probably still my favorite of the entire Hythrun Chronicles, and I think that is partly because the villains in this one are very, very on point. So each of these trilogies is very different, but I think this one definitely has the best villains in it by far. That we have like at least 3, if not maybe technically 5 different villains, and they all have completely different roles to play in this book, and it is so well thought out and just incredible. So even if you read the first book and you're kind of like, I don't know, the entire thing, this trilogy as a whole is actually really incredible, and the second 2 books get so much better than the first one. Next, we have the Wolfblade trilogy, which is Wolfblade, Warrior, and Warlord, and this is actually a prequel trilogy. I do still recommend reading them in publication order, because you do still catch stuff from this that you will catch because you read the first trilogy. However, because it is a prequel, you can technically read this one first. It takes place mostly in the kingdom of Hythria, which is a very interesting kingdom in itself, because it consists of different regions that are each ruled over by a different warlord, and they each have different surnames like Eaglespike and Lion's Claw and Hawksword and Wolfblade, obviously. So the Wolfblade family is the ruling family, and in this, we follow Princess Marla, who is the mother of Daemon Wolfblade, who is one of the main characters of the Demon Child trilogy, and she, at the beginning of the first book, she's like 16 years old, and she's gonna have to get married, and she's in this situation where she isn't like in love with somebody else, but she has a crush on somebody else because she's a 16-year-old girl and she doesn't want to have to deal with this crap. And her brother is the High Prince, or the basically king, and he is gay, and like he also just kind of parties all the time, and he's kind of just not that great of a ruler, and so nobody really puts any pressure on him to just marry some chick and somehow get her pregnant and somehow have an heir at all. Literally, it's all on Marla. They literally like are, okay, so obviously your brother's not gonna have an heir, so you'd better just like you know, everyone's interested in, you know, the child you're gonna have, blah de blah, so everyone wants to marry her, so she has to marry somebody, and all kinds of crap happens, and this is full of political intrigue. As this trilogy goes on, it gets less and less just about Marla and more just kind of about everybody. So as her children, Daemon and his siblings, are growing up, it follows them and the conflict that they end up getting into, and he has a sister who ends up being the head of the Sorcerers Guild and all kinds of stuff, so they are very, there's a lot of stuff happening in it, and a lot of who can you really trust? Probably nobody, because people are all trying to kill each other in this series and all kinds of stuff. So it's very different from the Demon Child trilogy in that there aren't a whole lot of villains in this one. It's more like everyone's kind of bad and you don't really know who you're trusting. So it's very different, and it's a very interesting trilogy, and I love it so much. And lastly, we have the War of the Gods trilogy, which consists of the Liar Thief, Retribution, and Covenant. Covenant is not yet out in the United States, and actually neither is Retribution. I just happened to find somebody on eBay who could sell it to me from Australia. So this trilogy takes place about at least a decade after the events of the Demon Child trilogy, but you still have to have read the Wolfblade trilogy as well to know who a lot of the people in this are. So this trilogy is a little bit different in that while yes we do get a lot of the same main characters, we do get some new ones as well. A large part of this series follows Princess Rakaya, who is the kid sister of Princess Adrena, who finds out that she's actually not the king's daughter at all. Her mother had like an affair, and the guy who is her actual father is being interrogated, and any minute now he's gonna like spill anything he can possibly use to save his life, basically. So she has to get out of there or else she will die. So she gets her sister, who is the king's illegitimate daughter. So she says, hey, do you want to, like, you get to be an actual princess now. You get to go take my place, pretend to be me, and go marry this old guy that I'm supposed to marry in my place, and then I'm gonna get out of here. And so her sister, Sharasi, who is the baseborn daughter of the king, she kind of goes, okay, cool, that sounds great, but she doesn't know that Rakaya is not the king's daughter after all. So she doesn't actually know what kind of risk she's getting into at all. And then there's a lot of stuff that goes on with some more political intrigue and some people who all hate each other and blah blah blah. But there's a lot more to this trilogy than that, but basically that's what this one's about, mostly. Fire Thief is probably my favorite book out of this whole trilogy, or this whole series. But overall, this trilogy thus far, the War of the Gods trilogy, I don't think is necessarily my favorite. I think the Demon Child trilogy and the Wolfblade trilogy still, I still like those a lot more. But anyway, I hope that this video has answered, you know, any questions you guys might have about the Hythrun Chronicles and where to start with it and what each trilogy is about and blah 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 blah. So anyway, if you've read this trilogy, let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know which one of the 3 trilogies in the series is your favorite. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye!